Tonight, the 6 minutes of terror on Bondi Beach that left 15 people dead. Australia's Prime Minister says the father and son carried out an act of pure evil, motivated by extremism. As the brave bystander who disarmed one of the shooters is hailed as a hero. In the Jewish community, grief turns to anger with calls for even tougher gun controls. And growing fears about how these attacks could affect community cohesion. We'll discuss that tonight. Plus, Donald Trump's response to the violent murder of Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife. And Jimmy Lai, a fierce critic of Beijing, will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. We'll hear from his son. That's all coming up on The World with me, Anna Botting. Hello, good evening. What led a 50-year-old man and his son to murder 15 people attending a Hanukkah event on Bondi Beach? As Australia wakes up after a mass shooting, that is the question at the centre of the investigation. Prime Minister Albanese says the men were motivated by extremism. And as the inquiry continues, candlelit vigils have been held on the beach in Jerusalem, in London and in Manchester. We'll focus on how the attacks unfolded and the bystander being hailed as a hero in a moment. But let's get started with our first report tonight from Cordelia Lynch in Sydney.
The grief is raw. The shock deep. And there's flickers of incredulity everywhere. It was the Jewish community that came under siege here in Bondi Beach. But the attack has left everyone bewildered.
I'm meant to be safe. I should be safe. It's our job to protect them, and we failed. We failed to protect them, and I don't have words for that. I don't know what we're supposed to do, but we're meant to protect our weak and our vulnerable. And we didn't do a good job of it. I feel sad about that.
Families who spent the weekend celebrating Hanukkah, a festival of lights, now taking their children to a memorial for the dead. The silence was searing. And so too were the songs.
For we are one and free.
A push to show respect and cohesion. But scratch the surface here, and there's rage.
Set the agenda.
A firm belief one of the deadliest massacres in Australia's history could have been prevented.
Do you think enough is being done to protect Jewish people in Australia?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think given what we've seen and what my friends have been through over the last 24 hours, I've had friends whose brains were blown to smithereens. So the answer is no. It almost feels like too little too late because there were so many signs of this. There were so many precursors to this event over the last 2-3 years that have been ignored by the government.
I warned, and my friends warned, and community leaders warned, and all of us dual citizens and Israeli citizens over here, we all warned that this is what will happen.
The Australian Prime Minister was quick to call this an anti-Semitic terrorist attack. But it was tougher gun laws he chose to focus on first.
The government is prepared to take whatever action is necessary. Included in that is the need for tougher gun laws.
But it's the motivation, the mindset of the gunmen many want addressed. What led the two attackers to commit mass murder? 24-year-old Naveed Akram, Australian-born, is now in hospital. His father, 50-year-old Sajid, was killed at the scene. These are some of the 15 victims killed, among them a 10-year-old girl and a survivor of the Holocaust. The scale of the loss is still unfolding.
This has been a hugely moving show of solidarity and defiance, but you can also see and feel a rising sense of anger from a community that feels deeply let down and now even more exposed.
It will take something seismic to reassure the Jewish community after years of increasing attacks across Australia. And yet so many here say now is the time to be seen, visible, fearful, but undeterred. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Bondi Beach in Sydney.
Well, video footage is giving us a clearer idea of what happened in the minutes after the men, named locally as Sajid Akram and his son Naveed, opened fire. Alex Rossi has been going through the images.
Recorded in the middle of the crowd, this video shows the chaos and terror as the victims came under fire. You can see them trying to take cover as gunshots sound around them. It took only 8 minutes to cause the worst mass shooting in Australia for nearly 30 years. But how did the terror attack unfold? This is the first footage we have of the gunman. It's around 2 minutes after the attack started. 50-year-old Sajid Akram and his 24-year-old son Naveed leave their car next to the bridge. They immediately start shooting. Their target, a Hanukkah event, a Jewish festival around 40 metres away, where more than 1,000 people were in attendance. The father, Sajid Akram, then heads towards the Hanukkah event and starts shooting. Almost 3 minutes into the attack, the hero of Bondi Beach emerges. 43-year-old fruit shop owner Ahmed Al-Ahmed wrestles the gun from Sajid Akram before turning it on him, forcing him to move back. He then places the gun safely behind a tree. But from the bridge, the son, Naveed Akram, then shoots Ahmed Al-Ahmed, hitting him in the shoulder. 2 minutes and 16 seconds after leaving the bridge, Sajid Akram returns and picks up a third weapon. Around 4 minutes and 38 seconds into the attack, 50-year-old Sajid Akram is shot by police. You can see him slumping to the ground. Just over a minute later, the 24-year-old is hit at least twice and falls to the floor. The police investigation into the motive behind the attack is continuing, but the Australian Prime Minister has said he's considering tougher gun laws, describing the attack as an act of pure evil. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Well, let's bring in Cordelia, who joins us live now from Bondi. We've seen those floral tributes being laid, Cordelia, quiet gatherings of people. So what is the mood there in Sydney today as Hanukkah continues?
Hello to you, Anna. Well, it's one of sombre reflection. Here this morning, many people coming down just to sit down, to share thoughts with each other, some just sitting in silence, some crying, some sharing their recollections of the terror that visited this site, a place so popular with tourists and local people that was full of people trying to celebrate. And I think what we're seeing evolve really here is a country searching for answers, how it was that these two attackers were able to bring such devastation and loss to the community here. I think the scale and the spectre of the violence have shocked many, and yet a lot of Jewish people you speak to here say that there were warnings. They did fear that a catastrophic attack would come, and there have been many attacks preceding this, both here and in Melbourne as well, home to the largest concentration of Jewish population within Australia. And I think what we're seeing evolve is a demand for answers from the Prime Minister. Has he and his government done enough to protect the Jewish people here? So I think we may well see him coming under more political pressure today and in the days to come as well. His focus so far has been on gun restrictions, this in a country where gun restrictions are already very tight, among the tightest in the world, in fact. But this is about attitudes, really, and making sure that the Jewish people in this country feel safe. And right now, many people here just don't feel that safety.
And amidst those questions about safety, the shock and the grief which is palpable there, as you said, the heart of this investigation goes down to how and why a father and son plotted this terrible attack.
Yes, and the investigation into the alleged gunman continue, a father and son, as you say, and it is now clear that the 24-year-old was in fact being investigated over a 6-month period. Now, as part of that investigation, it was deemed that he was not a threat to others, that there was no imminent or established sense of a threat to the Jewish people here in Australia. What is emerging is that the two men appear to have taken a trip to the Philippines, to a place called Mindanao. That is a place that has increasingly become connected to extremist ideology. Now, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has said that he does not believe that these two men were connected to any specific terror cell here, but that they did share an extremist ideology. There are reports that the two men had pledged allegiance to ISIS, but we don't have any more detail yet at the extent of any involvement with particular groups, and I think we'll see an increased demand for more detail on their backgrounds and if there were any kind of warning signs that they might carry out an attack of this scale.
Cordelia, live there at the scene of that attack. Thank you. Well, he is a father of two, a fruit shop owner originally from Syria, now being hailed as a hero. Ahmed Al-Ahmed is recovering in hospital after tackling and disarming one of the gunmen. His father says he was driven by the impulse to protect others, as Nicole Johnston reports.
This brave man is the hero of the Bondi attack, and everyone's talking about him. His name is Ahmed Al-Ahmed. When the gunman paused, Ahmed tackled him and then grabbed his rifle. It was fast. Ahmed took the gun and pointed it towards the attacker. He raised his hand in the air, but had been shot a number of times. He's now in hospital, stable but critical.
My son has always been brave, helps people, he likes that. He saw they were dying and people were losing their lives. And when that guy ran out of ammunition, he took it from him, but he was hit. We pray that God saves him for us.
I feel pride and honour because my son is a hero of Australia. There isn't a single media agency in the world that hasn't published what he did. All the way to President Trump thanked him for what he did.
Very, very brave person, actually, who went and attacked frontally one of the shooters and saved a lot of lives. So, very brave person who's right now in the hospital, pretty seriously wounded.
Originally from Syria, Mr. Ahmed is now a fruit shop owner with 2 children in Sydney. And this moment of extreme selflessness was applauded by everyone.
True hero, true hero. To be able to stand up to those monsters. I think it was a nice added benefit that he was a Muslim, but I think as a human being. I don't think right then he thought, I'm saving Jews, I'm not saving Jews. I think he was a human being that went in there and saved people that was there.
When I saw it, I was like, what a hero, what a courageous man. There was no one around him and he just went for it. Like, you didn't see fear in his eyes.
While the world reflects on its latest hero, there is work to be done.
Australia's Christian, Muslim and Jewish leaders have come together and say they won't allow this attack to divide them or for the seeds of hate to grow. But Muslim leaders have also told us that they fear the next few weeks could be a challenge to stop tension from rising within their communities.
The trauma from this attack will take years to heal. Bondi has been touched by terrorism, and it's unlikely to ever be the same. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Sydney.
We're learning more about those who died. 15 people were killed by the two alleged gunmen. The oldest victim has been named as 87-year-old Alexander Kleitman, a Holocaust survivor who came to Australia from Ukraine. Peter Meager was working as a freelance photographer at the Hanukkah event. He was a retired policeman, having served almost 4 decades in the New South Wales police force. 82-year-old Slovakian Marika Pagani was killed. She's been described as an avid volunteer and a member of Sydney's Harbour View Bridge Club. And 78-year-old Tibor Weizen also died during the attack. He was described as someone who brought joy and smiles to everyone. There are reports that he was fatally wounded while shielding his wife from the gunfire. She survived. Well, joining me now is Dr. Colin Rubinstein, Chief Executive of the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. Thank you so much for joining us on this devastating day. You must all be so numb. How are you coming together to get through this?
Thank you for having me. Yes, we're shocked and dismayed, but regrettably not really surprised at what's happened. We've been certainly personally, everyone's been affected. The new head of our Sydney office, Arsen Ostrowski, was grazed by a bullet to his head. He's undergoing a minor operation this morning and miraculously did a trump and survived. And the cousin of one of our staffers in our Sydney office, one of the rabbis, of course, was fatally shot. So unfortunately, that's typical of so many members of our community. We're very sorrowful and convey our condolences to the bereaved and those injured and wish them a speedy recovery. But we're dismayed and we're very upset, and there's a great deal of anger because we've been warning our authorities, our government and law enforcement, security agencies for 2 years, over 2 years and longer, about the viral spread of toxic anti-Semitism in this country. We've documented it week in and week out over those 2-year periods. And we've seen the explosion in Australia of anti-Semitic incidents in a way that we've never experienced before. And regrettably, even the behaviour of our government, its instant criticism and one-sided attacks on Israel, its bias, its call on Israel to exercise restraint before Israel lifted a finger in response to October 7, and the consistent series of decisions it's taken over the last 2 years, culminating in the wrong-headed and totally counterproductive decision to recognise the Palestinian state a few months ago, which represented an award for Hamas terrorism, of course, as we all know, compounded the problem. Yes, the government mouthed concern and criticised the anti-Semitism, but it didn't deal with the basics. And even now, while addressing the issue of further gun control restrictions, they're not according the crisis of the spread of anti-Semitism sufficient priority, because it's that spread of anti-Semitism, that normalisation of anti-Semitism that has crept into Australian public life that is inevitably connected to this explosion of anti-Semitism, creation of an environment where Jews are fair targets. And we've seen the demonstrations, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, over the last 2 years plus. We saw that terrible demonstration at the Sydney Opera House on October 9, F the Jews and so on. And the failure of the authorities, to act appropriately. And
so can I just, apologies for interrupting you, Dr. Rubinstein, but what do you mean? What specifically did you want to see that you didn't get? What do you mean when you say they needed
We should have had the
act
arrest of
appropriately?
those people inciting hatred on the spot. And instead, the only
You mean
person
people
arrested
marching, for example? Is
overnight was-
that?
We needed to see firm action against the incitement to hatred and the incitement to violence, which we've seen on the streets of our cities week in and week out over the last 2 years. We've seen the calls for globalizing the intifada, from the river to the sea, the elimination of the state of Israel. All Zionists are terrorists, and given 95% of Australian Jews, like Jews worldwide, believe in the self-determination of the Jewish people, which is all that Zionism is, we're fair game. And the government turned a blind eye to this vilification and demonization. And indeed, its one-sided approach on these issues added to the delegitimization and demonization of Israel, making the situation much more fragile and tense and damaging from our point of view. So, and businesses were destroyed, universities taken over, social media toxic, cultural institutions infected by this anti-Semitism, and blood libels about Israel committing genocide, apartheid, deliberate starvation in the Australian media as well. So this has created the environment in which we said this will end in violence and bloodshed, as it did. So unfortunately, we're not surprised. We're angry, we're defiant, we are a proud community and resilient. We're not going anywhere. And what's at stake here is not just the welfare and the safety of the Jewish community, central as that is, but it's the safety and welfare and the continuation of an open democratic society of Australia, an inclusive multicultural society we've celebrated and are so proud of, which is at risk here. And we've been comforted by the pouring out of expressions of sympathy and solidarity, which have come across the board from all Australians over the last 48 hours. And we hope this is a big wake-up call for our political leaders, for our judiciary, for our law enforcement, to treat this with the seriousness that it warrants going forward.
Dr. Rubenstein, we really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, you're watching The World. Still to come. As the nation mourns, we will be discussing the Australian Prime Minister's call for tougher gun controls.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual.
Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Well, the horror of the attack in Sydney targeting a Hanukkah celebration has had a significant impact on Jewish communities across the world. Here in the UK, vigils have been held remembering the victims, including tonight at Manchester's Heaton Park Synagogue, where 2 people were killed in an attack in October. Well, members of the Jewish community there said they feel a heightened concern about their safety. And in Australia, the debate has turned to the need for stricter gun controls. Well, joining me now is Samantha Lee, former Director of Gun Control Australia. Thank you so much for joining us. And many people obviously asking, how was it possible for one man to get 6 legally held weapons?
Yeah, well, that's a very important question. Here in Australia, we still have pretty solid gun laws. We still have the main pillars, which is a national licensing, national registration and a ban on long-arm semi-automatics. However, there has been a watering down of our gun laws over the years. It's been 20 years since the Port Arthur massacre, and one of the big erosions is the ability to easily acquire the second or subsequent firearms.
So tell us about the current rules on weapons in Australia then after the Port Arthur massacre. You know, can they be tightened further? Because Australia was seen as the gold standard, wasn't it?
Yes, and it still is a pretty gold standard. However, there has been this erosion around the outskirts, and it's been happening by the gun lobby behind closed doors, and so a lot of people are not aware of it. However, the main concern is that after the Port Arthur massacre, it was meant to be very difficult to get a second or subsequent firearm. To get the first firearm, you must show a genuine reason as to why you want that firearm, and based on the purposes for what you need it for, such as hunting or primary producer. However, to get the second firearm, you're supposed to show a special reason as to why the first firearm is not enough to serve the purpose. But what's happened over time is that this ability to get a second firearm has pretty much become a paper-only based matter, which means it's very easy for people to accumulate firearms. In fact, in some states in Australia, some people have 100 firearms in their home. This is from police firearms registration stats. So the ability to acquire firearms obviously is not as working as tough as it should be.
100 firearms. So something's clearly going wrong, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, to get a second firearm, obviously you'd have to prove a reason, but why someone needs 100 firearms and why that has been approved is obviously absurd.
Well, tell us if you can about the weapon that we clearly saw in some of the video that was shown yesterday, used by the younger of the 2 perpetrators, the son Navid Akram, allegedly, a bolt-action rifle with a straight pull. Why would something like that need to be owned legally?
Yes, well, the whole purpose of the Port Arthur Agreement was to restrict access to these high-powered weapons. And there's a big question now as to why that person had that firearm and if it was legally allowed. And there's a huge question about why it was allowed. Pump-action shotguns are very dangerous because their ability to be semi-automatic and to fire a round of bullets in a very short period of time. They are the weapon of choice in massacres, and that's why they need to be restricted. Unfortunately, gun laws have changed over the years because gun modelling and gun technology has also changed over the years, and some of our firearm laws have not kept up with this change in technology.
Yes, we're looking at the moment that hero, Ahmed al-Ahmed, managed to jump on the father, and everyone wondering why he didn't pull the trigger himself. But if it's a bolt-action rifle, you know, he'd have to do the mechanism himself, and he may not be a gun user. So, you know, you sit there, and in the end, he puts it down, so he himself is not taken out by arriving firearms officers. We've certainly heard from the Prime Minister Albanese suggesting that people can be radicalised over a period of time and licences should not be held in perpetuity. Would that be something that could be done quite quickly, that you hold a licence for a period of time and then you are reassessed, for example?
Well, actually, that should have been in place anyway. The Port Arthur Agreement did require that licence holders only be given like a 10-year period and then they have to reapply. So I'm not sure why that hasn't been in place for many years. The problem with massacres is that we just don't know who is going to commit them. And most of the time, unfortunately, it is licensed gun owners who don't have a criminal history. And that's why they go under the radar. The best thing we can do as a country is to restrict access to firearms, especially high-powered weapons, and especially restrict the access to the number of firearms in the community.
Samantha Lee, former director of Gun Control Australia. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, this is The World. Next up, the younger son of Rob Reiner has been charged with murder after the Hollywood director and his wife are found dead.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Los Angeles police have charged Rob Reiner's younger son, Nick, with the murder of his parents. The death of the famous Hollywood director and his wife, Michelle, prompted President Trump to claim they had died because of what he called Trump derangement syndrome. Rob Reiner's work included some of the most memorable movies of the 1980s and 90s, including When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me, and A Few Good Men. Sky's US correspondent, Martha Kellner, has the latest from Los Angeles and a warning her report does contain flashing images.
Rob and Michelle Reiner's home is dressed for Christmas. Wreaths on the gate and giant baubles on the tree. No hint of the horror that unfolded inside here. Reiner, one of Hollywood's most acclaimed film directors, and photographer wife Michelle found stabbed to death. The man arrested for murder is their son Nick, pictured here between the couple. And in the back of this family photo, aged 32, he'd struggled with drug addiction and mental health issues.
We have our robbery homicide division handling the investigation. They worked throughout the night on this case and were able to take into custody Nick Reiner, a suspect in this case. He was subsequently booked for murder.
What are you doing?
Reiner acted in sitcoms and films, but was best known as a director.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
The vision behind iconic hits like A Few Good Men
Just have an early meeting.
and When Harry Met Sally.
You don't play squash.
It was while filming When Harry Met Sally that Rob met the woman who would become his wife. Their love affair persuaded him to change the story, so the two main characters would end up together.
At the end of the movie, we had it where they run into each other in the street, they talk, and then they walk in opposite directions. The camera pulls up. And then I meet the woman who I've now been married to for 36 years, Michelle, and we fall in love during the making of the movie.
Reiner was a Democratic Party activist and vocal critic of President Donald Trump. In response to Reiner's death, Trump posted this on social media. He said Reiner had died because of the anger he caused others and that he had a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS, adding that Reiner had a raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump. Even in the current administration, where normal codes of conduct and standards of decency that you'd expect from a president no longer apply, there is disgust here that the nightmare that unfolded in this house could be exploited to make political statements.
What a tragedy. It's such a tragedy. I'm sick.
I don't know whether you've seen the president's post this morning on...
I have not. No.
He said that he died due to Trump derangement syndrome.
Leave it to our president. I mean, what a stupid thing to say. I'm not surprised. It's disgusting, though.
Was a very good man, very liberal. I liked his ideas, especially when he was talking against the new regime in America. Donald Trump is not a human being. He doesn't have any blood in his vein.
The Reiner's murder has been described as a Greek tragedy. A man who brought such joy with his art, whose movies will live on. His own life ended in the cruelest way imaginable.
Well, let's bring in Martha live. So their son, Martha, now in custody, and real questions about Donald Trump's intervention.
Yeah, I think you heard there, Anna, people in this local area near the Reiner's home disgusted about Donald Trump's intervention here, about his statement. But that disgust is shared in Washington, D.C., across the political aisle, Donald Trump's statement being condemned. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, said of Donald Trump he is a sick man. But we've also heard from Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky. He's one of those leading the campaign for the release of the Epstein files. He posted on X saying, regardless of how you felt about Rob Reiner, this is inappropriate and disrespectful discourse about a man who was just brutally murdered. I guess my colleagues in the Republican Party, the Vice President and the White House staff will just ignore it because they're afraid, he said. Similarly, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was once a close ally of Donald Trump, now a fierce critic of his, she said Rob Reiner and his wife were tragically killed at the hands of their own son, who had drug addiction and other issues. Many families, she said, deal with a family member with drug addiction issues. It's incredibly difficult and should, she said, be met with empathy. Another Republican congressman said that they would expect to hear something like Donald Trump said by someone who was drunk at a bar, not from the President of the United States. And so I think there is round condemnation today of Donald Trump's reaction to the nightmare that happened here.
Martha, live there outside the Reiner family home in LA. Thank you. Let's stay with US President. He has said that he will be filing his lawsuit against the BBC soon, speaking in the Oval Office in the last half hour.
In a little while, you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something. So we'll be bringing that lawsuit. A lot of people are asking, when are you bringing that lawsuit? Even the media can't believe that one. They actually put terrible words in my mouth having to do with January 6th that I didn't say. And the beautiful words that I said, right? The beautiful words. Talking about patriotism and all of the good things that I said, they didn't say that, but they put terrible words. They actually have me speaking with words that I never said. And they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. That's called fake news. So we'll be filing that suit probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Well, let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews. And James, any hope at the BBC that this would go away look dashed? The timeline suddenly looking quite tight.
Yeah, it does indeed, Anna. This all relates, of course, to a BBC Panorama broadcast about the January the 6th riots. The programme makers, they edited a Trump speech. The BBC conceded it was, or it gave the impression that he was making a call for violent action. Trump said that they replaced his beautiful words, you heard him there, replaced his beautiful words with terrible words. I can say it wasn't a matter of the BBC using AI. I presume he isn't going to argue that in court, Anna. But, you know, in due course, the BBC did apologise, although it rejected his demand for compensation. He had threatened Donald Trump to sue the corporation for between $1 billion and $5 billion. That action now, you know, would appear to be imminent, as we just heard there. He said that during a news conference. It was nothing to do with the BBC or the media at large. He mentioned his legal action unprompted. We will be filing it soon, he said, probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So, you know, having gone quiet on the BBC front, the matter clearly hasn't gone away for President Trump. A very difficult one, of course, for the corporation, who appear to have a fight on their hands, a considerable one. Remember, their Director General and news CEO resigned when this affair blew up. It's now facing the prospect, the BBC, of a very costly legal battle in the Florida courts with a president, don't forget, who's pursued and taken millions of dollars from the owners of media companies, the ABC and CBS in this country.
James, thank you. Well, another update tonight on a developing story. Police in Providence, Rhode Island have released new images of an individual who could be involved with the shooting at Brown University, where 2 students were killed and 9 others injured. Well, the new images show a man dressed all in black on the opposite pavement. The latest update comes after police released a person of interest who was arrested yesterday morning. 19-year-old Ella Cook, the leader of the campus Republicans, and 18-year-old Muhammad Aziz Umarzakov, an aspiring neurosurgeon, were killed in the shooting. The UK's sons and daughters need to be ready to fight. The warning tonight from the head of the British Armed Forces, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton. He said it was important to be honest with families over the threat from Russia.
Perhaps the most obvious impact on all of us will be the cost of building this resilience. Sons and daughters, colleagues, veterans will all have a part to play, to build, to serve, and if necessary, to fight. And more families will know what sacrifice for our nation means.
Well, that blunt intervention came on the day the new head of MI6 said this.
We all continue to face the menace of an aggressive, expansionist and revisionist Russia seeking to subjugate Ukraine and harass NATO. I find it harrowing that hundreds of thousands have died, with the toll mounting every day because of Putin's historical distortions and his compromised desire for respect. He is dragging out negotiations and shifting the cost of war onto his own population. But Putin should be in no doubt. Our support is enduring. The pressure we apply on Ukraine's behalf will be sustained.
Well, today, Ukraine said real progress has been made in the latest round of talks with America's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. President Volodymyr Zelensky has met European leaders tonight, with President Trump dialing in to those discussions. US officials say Washington has agreed to provide security guarantees to Kyiv as part of a deal to end Russia's war, and Moscow is said to be open to Ukraine joining the European Union. Well, in the last hour, President Trump suggested they are getting nearer to a deal.
We're getting closer. We're having tremendous support from European leaders. They want to get it ended also. And at this moment, Russia wants to get it ended. The problem is they'll want to get it ended, and then all of a sudden they won't. And Ukraine will want to get it ended, and all of a sudden they won't. So we have to get them on the same page. But I think that's working along. Very good talk.
President Trump there. Well, our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins is in Berlin, and strong warnings here in the UK about the threat of Russia. But there where you are, even the German Chancellor, Siobhan, sounding positive. Does it sound like progress is being made?
You're right about the German Chancellor. He said that for the first time since the start of the war, a ceasefire now seems possible. And if you listen to the mood that seems to be coming from the Ukrainians, the Europeans and the US, they do sound much more positive. I think if I was to sum up, I would say there have been steps forward, there has been progress, but there's still a lot of hard work to do. So let's go through the positives that we have heard, the things that have moved forward in the last 24 hours. So one of the big things is this security guarantees. When President Zelensky was heading to Berlin, he said that he would think about dropping his long-term bid to join NATO in exchange for security guarantees. We've now been told that the US has said that it will offer security guarantees a bit like those which you find in Article 5 of NATO. Also some interesting words from the Europeans on that point. They're talking about a multinational force that could help support Ukraine and protect their skies and their seas inside Ukraine, so not necessarily on a front line. So two things which will buoy the Ukrainians, make them feel more secure, but that suggestion that they might give up the bid to join NATO could also mean that a red line that President Putin had has also been erased. So positivity there. I think the other thing that's really important to note is this big boost in relationships that we've seen between the US and the Europeans and the Ukrainians in particular. Just cast your mind back to last week and that Politico interview where Donald Trump was calling European leaders weak and Europe was decaying. We've heard him criticise President Zelensky time and again. Well, in his speech tonight, he said that the Europeans had been a tremendous support. So for the first time in what feels like a long time, those three parties do seem to be more on the same page. But what are the sticking points? Well, one of those really big stumbling blocks, which we've talked about time and again, territorial concessions. We've heard from the US that it's up to the parties, Russia and Ukraine, to decide what is given up. And President Zelensky has said that this is a really difficult point of discussion. The other big thing is personalities. Donald Trump, today he might be Team Europe. Tomorrow he could very well be Team Moscow again. He cannot be relied upon for his ongoing support. And then, of course, President Putin and the Russian regime. They say they're open to discussions, that they're waiting to speak more to the US. However, their critics would say they have absolutely no intention of stopping fighting, that they're just playing for time. And if that's the case, then there is no real hope of a peace or a lasting ceasefire.
Yes, and still waiting to hear what Moscow makes of what has been discussed today. Any idea of next steps, though, Siobhan?
So what we know from President Zelensky is that there's going to be continued hard work and discussions, particularly with the US, over these points that are still left to negotiate on. So the US said today that 90% of the topic that they were at odds on, Russia and Ukraine, has sort of come to some sort of consensus on. We can guess that one of the 10% that's left is territorial issues. So they're going to be hammering out more details of that in the next few days. And then, of course, on Thursday, the big debate starts in the EU, where they're looking to try and release those frozen Russian assets to give as a loan to Ukraine, much needed money that without it will probably run out in the first quarter of next year. So it needs that money to fight.
Another controversial element, of course. Siobhan, live there for us in Berlin. Thank you. Now, the son of pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai has told Sky News that he fears he will never see his father again after he was found guilty of national security offences in Hong Kong. The 78-year-old media tycoon is a British citizen. He was arrested in 2020 after China imposed a national security law after massive anti-government protests. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ansmith has this report.
The people of Hong Kong already knew how this story would end. But still, they queued up to see it. What would be the fate of the man who's been called this city's greatest dissident? As Jimmy Lai's verdicts came down, they could only quietly watch on. The fervent pro-democracy figure guilty of national security offences. We've no expectation for the verdict, this woman says. There's no hope, there's no fairness. Jimmy Lai was one of this city's most bombastic figures, a billionaire media tycoon, a lifelong critic of Beijing,
whatever they do is fine,
an open supporter of pro-democracy protests. But in the crackdown that followed these scenes, opposition is now deemed a crime. Lai's case, a landmark example.
In court, Jimmy Lai looked thin and drawn, but he smiled and waved at his family and for a moment looked really struck by the emotion of it all. There was never really any doubt about what this verdict would be, but it is nonetheless a hugely symbolic moment for Hong Kong. It is a conclusion of sorts, not just for Jimmy Lai, but for the wide-ranging crackdown that's been seen here, the curtailing of free press and free speech.
Outside court, Lai's family were not free to speak.
Is it possible to get your response to the verdict today?
Doing so here could be dangerous. That was left to his son and lawyers in London. Lai is a British citizen. They say the government needs to act now.
Well, my biggest fear is that, because obviously that I never see my father again, that he dies in the Hong Kong prison. He's a British citizen, so if he dies in prison, it changes what we stand for as a country. We must not let that happen, and the Prime Minister can do a lot. It's about putting actions behind words. It's about making my father's release a precondition to closer ties with China.
The authorities here insist Lai used his newspaper and connections to incite violence and try to overthrow China's government. Nonsense, say pro-democracy figures. Emily is one of the few still willing to speak. She says hopes for improvement now slim.
Never say never.
But I'm a realist. I know that people are terrified. Most people do not want to fight for independence, but they want to be free.
Jimmy Lai was taken from court back to the prison where he's been held in solitary confinement. His trial is a marker for how Hong Kong has changed, and one that's been watched by the world. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News in Hong Kong.
So it has been a day of sombre reflection in Sydney after the devastating attack yesterday. Certainly, Australia's cabinet has now agreed to increase gun control rules, to work on a national firearms register as well, to tackle aspects such as the number of weapons permitted by gun licences and how long the latter are valid. But for those in Sydney near Bondi Beach, as you can see, the grieving continues. The 40 people taken to hospital after the attack included 2 police officers in a serious but stable condition. The victims were aged between 10 and 87. Of the 2 gunmen, the 50-year-old father was killed at the scene, taking the tally of dead to 16. His 24-year-old son remains in a critical condition in hospital.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.